My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 581, Mysterious Self-Confidence. Everyone, follow me. As long as we break through the fortress city and enter the Holy Dragon Kingdom, I will reward every elf with a bottle of water from the Spring of Life. Whoever captures either Watson or King Landar III can be my heir. In addition to that, capturing or killing the Holy Dragon Kingdom's important figures will also get you rewarded handsomely, the Elven King shouted. Then, the elves behind him began to shout. Yes, Your Majesty. The Elven King felt the power surge. His heart was filled with confidence. He did not know why, but he was confident they could break through the fortress city. He had been nervous before that. He had even sent assassins to investigate the situation in the fortress city. Perhaps that confidence comes from the heavens, hinting that I can conquer the Holy Dragon Kingdom. The Elven King's eyes burned with raging flames. His confidence came not only from the previous night but also from the beast that he had created after using supernatural evolution. That beast was called the Mountain Behemoth synthetic beast. It was dozens of meters long, with gears on the inside, and its outside was wrapped in flesh and blood. It looked like a huge magical beast mixed with metal and flesh. The inspiration for the Mountain Behemoth synthetic beast came from the deep-sea submarine he had seen in the fortress city. The Elven King did not know the principle behind the transformation of the deep-sea behemoth submarine into a magical beast. However, he could use supernatural evolution to give life to non-living creatures to achieve the same effect. Compared to the submarine, the mountain beast synthetic beast was more adaptable to land battles, and it was the same as the deep-sea submarine. The mountain beast synthetic beast could also change its form to become a magical beast. That was achieved by using supernatural evolution power. Combining inanimate rocks with flesh and blood with the supernatural evolution can create powerful weapons of war. Such a beast can unleash the power of at least a diamond tier elite, and I can have hundreds of similar fusion beasts, the Elven King muttered excitedly. The Mountain Behemoth synthetic beast was one of his trump cards. Other than him and a few elders, most of the elves in the Elven army were affected by the power of evolution. Their strength had risen to Platinum tier. All the Platinum tier mythical creatures, weapons, and armor were stimulated by the power of evolution and could continue to evolve. Some powerful soldiers had consumed water from the Spring of Life and would not die. Some weapons could continue to evolve and not be damaged. Even the Elven King did not know how he would lose that battle. Your Majesty, we discovered enemies above our heads. Should we attack? Bathed in a confident aura, an elf suddenly flew toward the Elven King and said in a low voice. The Elven King looked at the sky. He saw a few figures riding Pegasuses in the sky. From afar, he saw a young man and 3 women. The young man and one of the women looked very much like humans. The remaining 2 women were elves. The Elven King thought that one of the elves looked familiar. Is that Delta? The Elven King squinted his eyes. He was a peak Platinum tier elite anyway. He quickly identified those people. A look of ecstasy appeared on his face. Look at those people with Delta. That looks like Watson. It means that they had succeeded in their mission. Did they really capture Watson? Quick, tell the other elves not to attack. Get them to come down. The Elven King waved his hand, and the soldiers did as they were told. The Elven army, which had been galloping, suddenly stopped and looked up into the sky. Finally, Watson and others were brought to the ground. Watson could see the entire Elven army in front of him. The 100,000 elves were wearing emerald green leaf armor, obviously made of leaves. However, he had a feeling that it was even stronger than Platinum tier ores. The bows and arrows flashed with weak light as if they were breathing. It was clear that those armor and weapons were alive, and their quality surprised Watson. A few days ago, those elves were only silver and gold tier archers, but most of them had become Platinum tier elites. The elves' strength had improved by leaps and bounds in just a few days. That made Watson even more curious about the Elven race chess pieces. While Watson was sizing up the elves before him, the Elven King was also sizing him up. He's a youth, but he has no fear in the face of the Elven army. I heard from Landon that Watson once relied solely on strength to throw him onto the ground. He's a cultivation genius. He even built those mysterious ships. The sea folks and the dragon race listened to his orders. No wonder he could do that. Those who have such courage are not ordinary people. The more he looked at Watson, the more he could not help but sigh in his heart. At the same time, he felt a sense of envy. He was envious of King Landar III. The human kingdom had a genius like Watson. If the elves had a similar genius, they would have an easier invasion of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Of course, it was not impossible to achieve that goal then. Delta, I didn't expect you to capture Watson. I didn't have any expectations for you to complete the task of capturing Watson successfully, but you have completely exceeded my expectations. Oh, right. There's one elf that I don't recognize. Where are the other assassins? Why haven't I seen any of them? The Elven King seemed to have seen the elf beside Delta. They looked familiar, but they were also unfamiliar. He did not mind because he did have to see many elves in the Elven Kingdom every day. How could he remember everyone's appearance? Your Majesty, I'm sorry. Beta and the others are not here. Delta hesitated as she spoke. The Elven King understood her intentions, and his expression became gloomy. Is that so? They did not come back? Were they captured? It's all right. We'll go and rescue them now. The Elven King quickly regained his senses. That made Delta stunned. She did not know how to continue. Initially, she had planned to tell the Elven King that Beta and the others had died. She also wanted to explain that she had not captured Watson, and instead, Watson had captured her. However, seeing the Elven King's expression, she could not bear to continue. It was not strange for the Elven King to have such thoughts because he knew that the spring of life would grant the elves eternal life. So, he would not even think that the elves could die. He thought they were trapped in the fortress city. Watson, the elves will soon conquer the fortress city and take over the Holy Dragon Kingdom. The humans will become our slaves. As a rare genius among humans, it's a pity to let you die with them. I'll let you live if you can pledge your loyalty to me. While Delta was hesitating, the Elven King turned to look at Watson. His words revealed his confidence that Watson would die if he did not follow the king. That made Delta subconsciously cover her face. Knowing Watson's ability, she was afraid that he would attack the Elven King in a fit of anger. The Elven King dared to issue such an invitation to Watson even before she could figure out what was going on. She did not know where that mysterious confidence came from. Chapter 582, Personally break the first shield. So? Do you agree with that? Give me an answer. No matter what, I'm still the Elven King. It's rare for me to invite a human like you personally. The Elven King spoke unhappily after seeing that Watson remained rooted to the spot and did not answer him. The elves behind him chimed in. His Majesty is right, little brat. I advise you to agree to His Majesty's request quickly. Don't be so ungrateful. If you miss this opportunity, you will only become a corpse on the road later. In a few days, you may become the excrement of a magical beast. You won't even be a corpse. Wait a minute, Your Majesty. Watson is actually... When she saw the elves were getting more outrageous, Delta could not bear to listen to them and wanted to explain the situation. However, before she could finish her words, Watson nodded and revealed an innocent smile. All right, as long as you don't attack my family and friends, I'll join the elves. Don't worry. I can pardon your family and friends. We are benevolent that way. The Elven King smiled and waved his hand. He was already looking forward to the look on King Landar III's face when he found out that Watson had defected when they arrived outside the fortress city. I'm afraid his nose will be crooked from anger. Just thinking about that scene makes me laugh. He had recruited Watson partly because of Watson's talent, but more importantly, because of his identity. The Holy Dragon Kingdom's heir had defected to the Elves. That would become an unerasable stain in the Holy Dragon Kingdom's history. King Landar III, just wait for me. Not only will I destroy your kingdom, I will also beat you until you are in pieces. Then, when I am done torturing you, you will die. Gritting his teeth, the Elven King turned around and waved his hand, ordering the elves to continue moving forward. The elven soldiers around them started moving again, and many of their gazes fell on Nia. Miss, you must be very panicked after being captured by the fortress city. When we break through the fortress city later, if you're scared, you can come and hide in my arms. Since your master has joined the elves, you're part of us now. We'll definitely treat you well. Of course, I mean in bed. A few soldiers gathered their courage and came to Nia's side as they marched forward. They made a dirty joke about her. Nia's temperament and appearance were top-notch. In addition, she was like a maid by Watson's side. She did not seem to have a high status, which made many elves think so lowly of her. In their opinion, as long as they broke through the Holy Dragon Kingdom, the humans would be their slaves. When that time came, they could play with whomever they wanted. The elves' words made Nia's even colder. If not for Watson's lack of order, she would have already frozen those reckless elves into ice cubes. Your Highness Watson, is it really okay for us to do that? Delta also heard the elves' words. She did not say anything about it and only asked Watson. It was normal for a few scums to appear among the 100,000 elven soldiers. The key was Watson. She had planned to go to the Elven Kingdom as a messenger of peace to persuade the elves to give up the war, but halfway through, they were intercepted by the Elven King's army and sent back to the fortress city. What was going on? She wanted to cry when she thought of the Elven King's confident invitation to Watson. If the Elven King knew Watson's plan to go to the Elven Kingdom, she did not know if he would be able to say such words. What's wrong with that? Miss Delta, please calm down. Since the Elven King has sincerely invited me to join the Elven army, I can't refuse him. Let me see if he can break through the barrier. If he can't even break through the Starlight barrier, then there's no need for me to join the elves. Watson motioned with his hand for Delta to calm down. Seeing the teasing smile on Watson's face, Delta felt even worse. She could tell that Watson was treating the Elven King like a clown, wanting to watch a good show. Under such circumstances, even if she wanted to stop it, it was too late. Everyone had different thoughts. The Elven army spent several hours rushing through the ancient forest, arriving at the vast plains outside the original fortress city. Everyone, the fortress city is right in front of us. The humans would never expect us to come back in such a short time and charge forward. The Elven King stood on top of the mountain Behemoth synthetic beast and waved his hand. The elves behind him immediately roared and charged forward. Charge! The 100,000 elven soldiers stepped forward simultaneously, causing a great shock. The earth shook, and the sound rolled and dispersed the clouds. The Elven King nodded in satisfaction. However, his happiness did not last long before it broke. The elven soldiers stopped after charging for a few kilometers. They stopped shouting and paced around like headless flies, causing the formation to become chaotic. What's going on? The Elven King frowned. He had wanted to use the elven soldiers' shouts to scare the humans in the city and make them panic. Who would have guessed that the elven army would come to a halt halfway through? Your Majesty, a huge protective shield has appeared in front of us. It seems to be very sturdy. It looks to have been formed by some kind of large-scale magic. We can't pass through it. An elven general ran back from the chaotic crowd in front of them. He stood in front of the Elven King and stomped his feet, replying in a low voice. A huge magic protective shield. Who would have thought that humans would have the time to create such a thing? Why don't you just use the barrier to break it? You guys are now platinum tier elites, not silver or gold tier anymore. You're useless. Do you really need me to do such a small thing personally? Your Majesty, I'm sorry. The barrier is so strong that we can't break it. That's why we came to report to you. The Elven general appeared to be very embarrassed. What shield is so strong that even platinum tier power can't break it? Let me see. After tidying his clothes, the Elven king got up from the synthetic beast. A lush wind domain appeared under his feet, carrying him up into the air. When he was in the air, he could see a few miles away a starlight barrier was in front of the Elven army. The barrier was as high as the sky and as deep as the earth. It covered everything in sight, and its area was immeasurable. Everyone knows that the larger the range of the protective shield, the more energy is needed, and the larger the field, the weaker the defense. Those humans created such a large-scale magic protective shield. Who knows how much power it needs to consume every day? I wonder how many days it will last. What a stupid move. The Elven King had an assessment of the protective shield in front of him. He belittled the people who created it. In his opinion, there was enough energy to make such a huge protective shield that it was entirely possible to create a smaller and stronger defensive barrier that could be wrapped around the fortress city. In that way, it would be more difficult for them to attack. Since the humans gave him a chance, he could not give up. He immediately flew to the front of the barrier with the wind domain. He said, "Only one barrier is enough to stop you from moving forward. Are you really an elf? We have faced so many other difficulties head-on, let alone just one protective shield in front of us. Even if there were 9 magic protective shields in front of us, we would still pass through it. I will personally break the first shield for everyone." Chapter 583, The Awkward Elven King. Long live the elves! Long live His Majesty! The Elven King's words made the elves below excited, and they raised the weapons in their hands. The Elven King put his hands together, and circles of green hurricanes appeared on his arms. Those hurricanes connected and turned into a massive wind blade 100 meters tall, looking solid. The whistling hurricanes sucked the air in the vicinity, making it difficult for the elves to breathe. Platinum tier fighting technique, Storm Breath Cut. Swoosh! The 100-meter-long giant sword suddenly fell and cut through the starlight barrier at a breakneck speed. With a crisp sound, the Elven King put down his clasped hands, turned around, and made a relaxed pose without even looking at the barrier. He wanted to use the momentum of that sword to break the barrier to encourage the soldiers. However, after waiting for a long time, the expected cheer did not come. That made him a little stunned, and he subconsciously looked behind him. There was not a single scratch on the barrier that he had hit with his platinum tier fighting technique. When the hurricane sword, which was 100 meters tall, hit the barrier, it was like a gentle breeze blowing across the surface, and it quickly dissipated. What's going on? The Elven King was dumbfounded. He was a peak period platinum tier elite. It was one thing if an ordinary platinum tier soldier could not break through that barrier, but he was a peak platinum tier elite. Perhaps the barrier was diamond tier? A diamond tier barrier to cover such a large area? Even a diamond tier mage might not be able to do it. At the very least, many diamond tier mages would have to cast their spells together. However, he had never heard of such a mage in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. While he was thinking, the Elven King lowered his head and felt the strange expressions of the 100,000 elven troops behind him. That made his face burn. Gritting his teeth, he continued to speak in a clear voice, "I didn't expect that barrier to be so strong. I was just warming up. Now, I'm going to do it for real." Druid secret spell, Storm Dragon King transformation. 8 layers of storm breath, break. Scales appeared on his body. The Elven King turned into a dragon with a storm wrapped around his body, emitting a diamond tier aura. As the 8 layers of tornadoes merged, the dragon's breath, burning with green flames, shot out from the dragon's head and landed heavily on the barrier. The starlight barrier, which had not reacted a moment ago, rippled at that very moment. However, it was only a ripple. The scorching breath continued for a few minutes, and the Storm Dragon King, who was the Elven King, had blisters on his mouth. Even though his teeth were blackened by the heat, the Starlight barrier still did not move at all. That barrier seems to be too strong. Even His Majesty could not break it using the Druid's secret spell. It must be Diamond Tier, an elf said. The elves continued to look at the protective barrier that had not changed despite being burned. Perhaps the protective barrier's strength is now high, but His Majesty might not be strong enough to break it. The king and the other elders might not have used the supernatural evolution's power. Is there a drawback to the power? Another elf said. The elves did not speak loudly. However, the Elven King was a peak Platinum Tier elite, so those words still reached his ears. Soldiers, attack that protective shield with me. We must be able to break it. The 4 Elven elders, led by Landon, flew into the sky and cast more Druid secret spells. They transformed into different magical beasts. They were either scratching with their claws or biting with their teeth as they released powerful magic attacks. No matter what kind of attack landed on the protective shield, it was fully absorbed by it. It could not break through the protective shield at all. D***mn it. What kind of magic is that? Why is it so strong? Even Diamond Tier ores are not as strong as that protective shield. The Elven King used his dragon breath to attack the protective shield while gritting his teeth. The elves were even more furious when the elders and the Elven King could not break the barrier. What did His Majesty say? The elves are fearless in the face of difficulties. I didn't expect to encounter difficulties when we arrived outside the Holy Dragon Kingdom. We haven't even seen the fortress city. The lofty words that the Elven King had said were a perfect slap in his face. Your Majesty, it seems like we are unable to break that barrier. Landon, who had transformed into a heaven-devouring python, grabbed the Starlight barrier and bit it. Unfortunately, his teeth broke and fell, but the Starlight barrier was still intact. We have to break it even if we can't. Where are the dragons? Get them to help break this Starlight barrier, the Elven King spoke angrily. He had used the mountain behemoth synthetic beast that he created through supernatural evolution. If they turned into giant beasts to attack the barrier, it would be possible to break it. However, that was his trump card. He did not want to use them lightly until he saw the humans in the fortress city. Your Majesty, did you call for me? A languid and soothing female voice sounded beside the Elven King. The green-haired forest dragon king, Rita, appeared beside the Elven King. She reached out and flipped her hair, a faint smile on her face. As an ally of the elves, the dragons had to follow the elven army when they attacked the Holy Dragon Kingdom. However, unlike the elves, the dragons chose to fly in the sky. She had seen Watson caught by the elves and then captured by a synthetic beast. She had also seen Watson taken to the fortress city. She wanted to rescue him. However, after seeing Watson's calm appearance, she understood that Watson was just acting. She was relieved and chose to cooperate with him. Watson had obviously created the massive shield in front of her. It contained the fluctuations of the Starlight tier. Even though she was at the Dragon God tier, it would not be easy for her to break it, let alone the weaker elves. She was helping the elves because the elves could not even break the first protective shield. Forest Dragon King, you came at the right time. Help me break the barrier. Sure, but I'm not helping you for free. I want you to give me a bottle of water from the spring of life. Forest Dragon King, what do you mean? We signed a contract. We did sign a contract, but the contract states that the dragons will help you when you attack the Holy Dragon Kingdom. I don't know what that huge light barrier is, but it's still some distance away from the fortress city on the edge of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Maybe it has nothing to do with the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Is it wrong for me to ask you for a reward for breaking it? You. Knowing that the Forest Dragon King was twisting his words, the Elven King had no choice but to endure it. He knew that if he and the elders did not use supernatural evolution, Rita would be the one most likely to break that barrier. The Elven King nodded as he transformed back into his original form. "All right, I promise you. As long as you help me break through the barrier, I will give you a bottle of water from the Spring of Life. I don't have it with me right now. I will help you get it when we return to the Elven Kingdom. Deal?" As Rita spoke, her emerald green hair fluttered in the wind. Stars appeared in the sky, outlining the body of an enormous natural dragon. The shadow of the dragon even blocked out the sun. Nature's divine power, the world tree's sword. The majestic power gathered in her hand turned into an illusory world tree. The huge trunk stretched for at least 1,000 meters. Unlike ordinary world trees, that one was like a sharp sword polished by a god. She used her completely disproportionate palm to throw it onto the starlight barrier the moment it appeared. The 1,000-meter-long giant sword cut a wide crack in the starlight barrier. The sky and the earth trembled as well. Chapter 584, I didn't create it. The barrier is open. Everyone, follow me and charge. The Elven King waved his hand, recalling the promise he had made. He said, "The Forest Dragon King is our ally, so their power is ours." In other words, if she breaks through the starlight barrier, it's equivalent to us breaking that barrier. "Yes, Your Majesty." Many elves curled their lips, they thought the explanation was forced. However, they soon forgot about that matter. No matter how embarrassing the Elven King had been, at least they could break that barrier. They would be able to take over the fortress city soon. With that in mind, the elves picked up their weapons again and rushed forward. Then, they stopped halfway, and their expressions were even weirder than before. "What's wrong now?" The Elven King felt like he had lost his dignity because he could not break the protective shield and had to request the help of the Forest Dragon King. Then, his troops had stopped again. He suppressed his anger when he asked that. "Your Majesty, a similar starlight barrier has appeared in front of us. Even our men are unable to break it. Look." The Elven general who had just reported to the Elven King returned with a helpless expression. "Another starlight barrier? How is that possible? How many starlight barriers did those humans create?" The Elven King was also stunned. He was already shocked by the starlight barrier they had just broken through. He did not know how the humans did it, he did not expect to see a second barrier. Did those humans develop some new technology? Or was that the effect of a treasure from an ancient ruin? "Forest Dragon King, I'll have to rely on you for the next barrier." After thinking for a while, the Elven King turned around and humbly looked at Rita. "No problem. The reward is still water from the Spring of Life, but... I wanted 2 bottles this time. Dragon King, you're extorting me." The Elven King was so angry that his mouth was crooked. Rita had only asked for 1 bottle of water a moment ago, and then he wanted 2. If that went on, Rita would ask for even more. The Elven Kingdom only had one valuable thing because they had to conquer the Holy Dragon Kingdom. They had almost used all of it. "Well, you can always solve it yourself." Rita gestured at the barrier. The Elven King rubbed his chest. The only person to help them with the problem was Rita. He could not do anything about it. "I understand, Dragon King. I'll give you 2 bottles of water from the Spring of Life. I'll leave the protective shield to you. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Rita rolled her eyes and raised her slender hand again. She summoned a giant sword the size of a world tree to split the starlight barrier open and let the Elven army enter. The Elven King did not say a word, but his expression was extremely gloomy. He had already lost several bottles of water from the Spring of Life before he even saw the fortress city. He blamed the humans in the fortress city for that. He would not let those humans end well after he broke into the city. Then, he raised his head and looked forward. At that time, he did not say anything to boost morale because he had to make sure that there was no starlight barrier in front of him. Otherwise, it would be even worse if he was slapped in the face yet again. When he looked over, the Elven King was stunned because he found another starlight barrier in front of him. That made him scratch his hair in madness. Why is there still a starlight barrier? Is it endless? Your Majesty, do you still need my help? This time, the price will be 3 bottles of Spring of Life water. I'm not trying to trick you. After all, every time I make a move, I have to expend energy, and it's getting harder and harder for me to break the barrier, Rita said, making the Elven King feel even more uncomfortable. If there were many more starlight barriers, he would not be able to pay with more water from the Spring of Life. Of course, that meant they would have to retreat. However, things had progressed to that point. Your Majesty, those starlight barriers weren't here a few days ago. Someone must have made them 2 days ago. What about the assassin team that broke in to capture Watson? Perhaps they know something about it. That was right. That makes sense. In fact, I thought of that too. Go ahead and get Delta and Watson. The Elven King nodded and ordered his subordinates to summon them. Soon, Watson and Delta were brought before the Elven King. The first person he asked was Delta. Delta, when you came here, did you encounter those starlight barriers? If so, how did you enter? And how many of those starlight barriers are there? Delta glanced at Watson before answering. She spoke after receiving Watson's affirmative gaze. When we came here, we also encountered those barriers. There are 9 barriers, and each one has a defense comparable to the Starlight tier. We could get past them because of Beta. He could control the bones, and there was no lack of remains of ancient gods among them, so he was able to break through the barriers. I got it. The Elven King nodded. On the surface, he was calm, but in his heart, he was cursing himself for being a jinx. When he had mobilized the elves, he had said that regardless of whether there were 1 or 9 barriers, they would all pass through it. He did not expect that there were actually 9 such starlight barriers. One had to reach Starlight tier to break through it. Such a barrier was beyond his understanding. Initially, he was full of confidence in attacking the fortress city, but his confidence had shattered. Delta, answer me one more question. How were those 9 barriers created? If humans created those 9 starlight barriers, it meant that there was an elite among humans who could create a starlight tier protective barrier. They must be a starlight tier elite. I'm not too sure about that. Your Majesty, you should ask his Watson about that. Delta almost blurted out the honorific title she had for Watson, so she quickly coughed to cover it up. The Elven King turned to look at Watson. Even though he did not say anything, the meaning was obvious. Watson smiled and said, "No one created those 9 barriers. They are attached to a building called the Planetary Fortress." I see. So it was a protective shield attached to the building. That building, called the Planetary Fortress, must be ancient. It must have been excavated from the previous era. The Elven King was relieved when he heard that humans did not make it. It was just as he had thought. There were no such elites among the humans. They were lucky enough to dig an ancient relic with a protective shield. That was how those humans were barely able to withstand their attacks. Seeing that the Elven King believed Watson's words, Delta's lips moved. She looked like she wanted to say something, but finally, she held her tongue. Watson, on the other hand, maintained a smile. It was not surprising that the Elven King believed him because he told the truth. He did not create the Starlight Barrier, the Planetary Fortress did. Chapter 585, The Sky-Conquering Behemoth. After finding out the secret of the Starlight Barrier, the Elven King's face regained its confidence. It was difficult because we didn't know how many there were. Now that we know there are 9, it should be easier. If you don't know the number, you won't know how to solve it. Now that you know there are 9 of them, it'll be easy. Mountain Behemoth Synthetic Beast, it's time for you to unleash your power. Transform into a behemoth and tear those light barriers into pieces. Reaching his hand into his chest, the Elven King's heart glowed with a green light. A piece shaped like a broken tree was revealed, emitting a green light that enveloped the synthetic beasts within the army of 100,000 soldiers. Those giant beasts, made from the flesh of magical beasts, inanimate ores and other materials, expanded in size instantly, turning into metal behemoths that were at least 100 meters tall and as big as a small mountain. Black cannon barrels extended from the backs and limbs of the behemoths. Those cannons were at least diamond tier strength. Blast them! Balls of magic bullets shot from the cannon barrels and hit the barrier, leaving large holes in the dazzling Starlight barrier. Those attacks could cause damage to the Starlight barrier, but the effect was negligible. That was because the Starlight barrier would quickly absorb the power of the stars in the sky to recover after being damaged. The Elven King also saw that. He said, "The evolution limit is lifted." Over 100 cannon barrel-like behemoths roared. Their bodies grew at a rapid speed. They intertwined with each other and turned into an even larger monster. It was difficult to describe the appearance of that monster. It had a head like that of a dragon, but that head was made of metal. It also had a body as wide as that of an ancient giant. Its front, chest, back, and limbs were covered with rocks, and on those rocks, countless barbs were exposed, reflecting a dazzling cold light. Starlight tier synthetic beast, tyrant beast. It evolved from 100 mountain behemoth synthetic beasts, and it had even more powerful attributes. Abilities: Mountain Fragment, grasping the mountain as a weapon to attack the enemy; Super Strong Earthquake, using oneself as a point to trigger a large-scale earthquake; Damage Rebound, half of the attack against oneself rebounded back; Transformation Strengthening, the body can adapt to the terrain and constantly change its form; Sky Shaking Missile, the barbs on the body can fly out and cause large-scale explosion damage. Additional abilities: Mountain Divine Kingdom, Absolute Power, and Absolute Defense. After the beasts merged into one, the information appeared in Watson's eyes. Natural evolution is indeed one of the powers contained in the race chess pieces. It is one of the life source's laws. It is indeed powerful to turn a non-living being into such a terrifying monster. Watson could not help but sigh at the giant beast in front of him. Even if he wanted to use the fusion system to create a Starlight tier synthetic beast, it would not be an easy task. Then, the giant beast quickly raised its barbed fist wrapped in heavy rocks and smashed down on the Starlight barrier in front of it. It immediately shattered the barrier. The Elven King could not help but look pleased. He glanced at Rita, whose expression was not too good, and said, "If I had known that the synthetic beast that was so powerful, I would not have needed to use the Spring of Life to ask for the Forest Dragon Kings. I had lost a few bottles for nothing. However, I am too lazy to care about it. Compared to the Holy Dragon Kingdom's wealth, a few bottles of water from the Spring of Life is nothing. Overlord Beast, let's go." After giving the command to the synthetic beast, the Elven King used the supernatural evolution to radiate the land and plants around him. While the Overlord Beast continued to break the barrier, all the land and plants radiated by the supernatural evolution grew in size and intertwined with each other. Soon, a similarly gigantic plant-shaped magical beast with a metallic luster appeared beside the Overlord Beast. That synthetic beast was called the Earth-Shaking Behemoth. One sky-conquering behemoth and one earth-shaking behemoth. Two synthetic beasts close to 1,000 meters long acted as the king's vanguard. The 9 Starlight barriers were quickly broken, one by one. 100,000 elves followed the two colossus-like monsters and arrived at the Holy Dragon Kingdom's territory. Every elf's face was filled with excitement and the desire to kill. Where are the people from the fortress city? Where do they hide? Did those human rats cower after seeing our powerful strength? An elven warrior looked around. After discovering no traces of the fortress city after the Starlight barrier, he sneered. The other elves around him said, "It's possible. After all, humans have always been timid creatures. Since they won't come out, let's search for them. With the 2 giant beasts that His Majesty has fused, I believe that they can destroy the human city with one kick." Delta, where is the city? The Elven king was also puzzled because he did not see it. Your Majesty, please don't be anxious. The fortress city has been transformed in the past 2 days, and it's not quite the same as what we elves remember. The current fortress city is called the Planetary Fortress, and it's a moving city. If we calculate the time, it'll take at least half a day to see it. Delta, are you out of your mind? How can there be a city that can move on its own? However, it sounded very familiar. I seem to have heard of it somewhere before. I remember now. When that young man named Watson introduced the Starlight Barrier, he said that the planetary fortress had created the Starlight Barrier. I can't believe that that planetary fortress not only has a powerful barrier, but it can also move on its own. That's just what the humans in Delta said. Even if that planetary fortress is a relic from ancient times, it can't move all the time. Otherwise, it would have been discovered long ago due to the noise it made when it was moving. Many elves did not believe Delta's words and started mocking her. A bunch of ignorant fellows. You're saying that because you've never seen a real planetary fortress. If you had, you would not say that. Delta snorted coldly. They were elves. At that moment, she could not help but feel anger toward her compatriots. Ignorance was the most frightening thing. When she first saw the planetary fortress, she was shocked. She did not expect humans to create such a magical building. Compared to other races, humans were weak, but they also had powerful abilities. That was their unparalleled creativity. They had to show respect to a strong race so that they would not be blinded by pride. Is that so? If what you said is true, then let us take a look at that so-called planetary fortress. Who doesn't know how to talk big? You even said that we had to wait here for half a day before we could see it. Who would wait here for you? Delta's words caused elves to get angry, making them even more sarcastic. The river is yellow. Have you seen a yellow river? The water in that river is probably that color because it has been so many years. It must have become moldy and stinky. An elf pointed at a wide river on the ground not far from them. The river was the Golden River, created by Watson. It extended far away in the direction of the Starlight Barrier. There were many similar rivers nearby. The Golden River was visible almost as far as the eye could see. The river had many branches so it could pass through the city to the planetary fortress. Chapter 586, Where did the wine come from? Everyone, that river is not moldy or rancid. It is the Golden River. As long as you take a sip, you will be able to advance to Gold Tier directly. If you soak your body in that river, you will also be able to obtain a powerful attack and defense comparable to a Gold Tier weapon, Watson explained. His voice was not loud, but every elf heard it. If you drink it, you can turn into a Gold Tier elite. If you soak in it, you can gain a defense comparable to that of a Gold Tier weapon. Who would believe it? If you don't believe me, you can try it. Watson stretched out his hand. Immediately, some elves stood out unwillingly. In just a moment, they caught an ordinary mouse. I've checked that mouse, there's no problem with it. If it doesn't get stronger after drinking from the river, it proves that you're lying. I want you to kneel and apologize to me. Sure. Watson nodded. Then what if I am not lying? Shall I kneel and apologize to you? Then, the elf threw the mouse in his hand into the river. In just a moment, the rat struggled in the river and sank. The elf immediately revealed a smug smile. See, you're just talking big. Now, I want you to kneel and admit your mistake. Of course, it's fine if you don't want to kneel. You can give me that beautiful woman beside you as compensation. The elf's eyes were filled with greed as he pointed at Nia. His actions caused a cold glint to flash in Watson's eyes. The time is not up yet. Why are you in such a hurry? Now, look at the rat in the water. The elves looked in the direction that he had pointed. Soon, they gasped. That rat is not dead. It seems to be swimming in the river. Look, it's much bigger now. The color of its body has changed from grey to gold, and it has even grown wings. This is too shocking. Everyone was even more shocked when the rat flew upward. Its entire body was golden, as if it were made of gold. A pair of huge golden wings on its back flapped gently, and a powerful aura spread out in all directions. There was no doubt that the rat had become a gold-tier magical beast after drinking from the river. How could that be? The elf was dumbfounded. A bet is a bet. Now, it's time for you to kneel and admit your mistake. Watson chuckled. The elf pursed his lips. His face was burning hot, and he was hesitating whether or not to kneel. I will keep my word. I've lost. After a moment of silence, the elf gritted his teeth and knelt toward Watson. Watson did not want to find any more trouble with the elf. He turned around and left. I didn't expect that river to have such a powerful effect. I remember the last time I came here, it did not have such an effect. They have a flying city and the Golden River. The humans in the fortress city are too lucky. After witnessing the effects of the Golden River, the elves came to the riverside and drank from it. They had never seen such a precious treasure. It might even be comparable to the spring of life. However, it looked like an ordinary river. If it were not for the war, the elves would not have been able to drink from the spring of life. However, they could drink that for the rest of their lives. There were already elves who were planning to conquer the Holy Dragon Kingdom. They would have to make a few golden rivers to reach the Elven Kingdom. This water is so delicious. An elf who had drunk from the river wiped his mouth and could not help but exclaim in admiration. Just the clear and refreshing taste alone can make me drink a lot. Furthermore, I feel much better after drinking it. Seriously? I'll try it too. Wow, it's really true. Everyone, this is the Holy Dragon Kingdom. It's better to drink less. The Elven King coughed and said with dignity, see, many soldiers come to the riverside to drink from it, and some even took off their armor and jumped into the river. The scene was a bit chaotic. After all, that was not his kingdom. It would be terrible if someone poisoned the water. Furthermore, those elves said that the water was delicious. How delicious could river water be? Your Majesty, the water is really delicious. Try it. The elven elder, Landon, used ice magic to create a simple cup. He held the cup in his hand and handed it to the Elven King. The Elven King took the cup and took a sip even though he did not want to drink it. After taking a sip, his eyes instantly widened. That taste! Isn't it delicious? This is the first time I've drank water from the river. Nothing was added to it, but it has a refreshing sweetness. I felt better after drinking it. Go and get me another cup. The Elven King, who was filled with hostility toward the Golden River water just a moment ago and thought that the water was dirty and unhygienic, also became intoxicated. In just a few minutes, all the elves sat on the bank of the river and enjoyed the water. All of them looked intoxicated, including the Elven King, who was holding a cup and tasting it carefully. Soon, he snapped back to his senses and realized something was wrong. He slammed the cup onto the ground. Crack! We are here to attack the fortress city. Why are we staying by the river bank? Get up! Well, Your Majesty, don't be so anxious. Delta said that the planetary fortress would take half a day to get here. Instead of searching like a headless fly, we might as well eat something here. Let's first try the bamboo rat that I roasted. That bamboo rat is a gold-tier magical beast that has consumed the river water. Its meat is fresh, tender, and full of nutrients. You won't be able to eat it anywhere else. Some of the elves beside him had already started a fire to roast some gold-tier magical beasts to eat. Among them, Pagani placed a skewer of freshly roasted bamboo rats in front of him and blew on it before passing it to the Elven King. The Elven King did not want to eat it at first, but the surface of the gold-tier bamboo rats gave off a golden light and had crispy skin. Coupled with the continuous fragrance of the meat, he could not help but swallow his saliva and take a small bite of it. This meat is so delicious. Like an elf who loved nature, their cooking methods were particular about maintaining the original flavor of the ingredients. They rarely used fire, and even if they did use fire, they would only roast it slightly. The meat in front of him was roasted to the right temperature. It was filled with the fresh fragrance of plants. Perhaps he had consumed the golden river water that he felt completely different, but that was the first time he had eaten such delicious bamboo rat meat. Just eating meat feels like something is missing. Your Majesty, why don't you come and have some wine with us? Wine? Where did the wine come from? After the Elven king wolfed down a bamboo rat, he was stunned when he heard Pagani's words. He turned around and realized that Pagani had a pot of wine in his hand. The wine had a golden sun color, and it was full of a rich fruit fragrance and a familiar taste. That is the taste of the sun fruit. Is that brewed from the sun fruit? Your Majesty, you really are an elite. That's right, that wine was brewed from sun fruit. It was called the sun fruit wine. The Holy Dragon Kingdom sells it for 1,000 gold coins per cup. For you, Your Majesty, I only charge 500 gold coins for all the wine that your troops have bought today. Watson held 2 bottles of sun fruit wine in his hands and walked toward the Elven King. Chapter 587, A Visit to the Dragon Palace. They had used sun fruits to make wine. That group of humans was too extravagant. The Elven King's gaze was attracted by the wine in Watson's hand. He could not help but whine in his heart. The sun fruit was a unique fruit on the world tree. It only matured after thousands of years, and even he had only tasted a few of them, let alone using the fruits to make wine. They say that humans enjoy it very much. It is indeed so after seeing it today. I don't know how they got the sun fruit. If the wine they usually enjoy is that, then it is too enviable. The Elven King shook his head abruptly. No, why is everyone drinking wine so naturally? We are here to fight, not to drink. And how did they get that wine? Didn't Elder Pagani just explain it? While waiting for the planetary fortress to return, we might as well drink some wine. As for where that wine came from, the Elven King noticed a group of sea folk beauties transporting wine boxes from the river to the riverbank. He was stunned. The sea folks helped to transport the wine from the royal city. The sea folk women turned their heads and smiled at him. What's wrong with that group of sea folks? Did they have time to send wine from the royal city? Isn't the royal city very far from here? How can they send the wine so quickly? The Elven King's heart was filled with doubts, and he could not help but look at Watson. The Holy Dragon Kingdom now has a dragon palace network formed by the Golden River. All the waterways are connected, and as long as there is water, the fleet can move quickly. We can reach any place in the Holy Dragon Kingdom instantly through that. Your Majesty, would you like to give it a try? Watson explained with a smile. The last time they came to the fortress city, they used the Dragon Palace network too. It's such a magical thing. Take me to see it. The Elven King's eyes lit up. His original attitude toward attacking the Holy Dragon Kingdom was fueled by hatred. Of course, he also knew that he would receive a large amount of wealth after defeating the Holy Dragon Kingdom. However, he did not expect that the wealth would be more than he had expected. If the Dragon Palace network fell into the hands of the elves, they could reach anywhere instantly. It was hard to imagine how powerful the elves would become. Your Majesty, this way, please. Wait a moment. Watson made a gesture of invitation. He was leading the Elven King to the river when the Elven King suddenly called out to him. What's wrong, Your Majesty? Are you worried about the danger of entering the Dragon Palace network? If that's the case, you can bring more guards with you. No, I'm not worried about that. Watson, I haven't had the sun fruit wine yet. Ah, yes. Seeing that the Elven King's dignified expression was a little uneasy, Watson suppressed the smile in his heart as he poured the Elven King a cup of sun fruit wine. The Elven King was very honest when he said that. The Elven King took a sip and revealed a look of enjoyment. If it were not for the sake of maintaining the dignity of a king, he would have moaned. It was hard to imagine that the wine was so delicious. He had never tried it before that. He took another sip of the wine and let the liquid swirl in his mouth. After a few seconds, he could not bear to swallow the wine. The wine is indeed good. Watson, you said that the wine is only sold for 1,000 gold coins. I wonder where humans got so many sun fruits. Typically, the sun fruits only grew near the world tree. In the entire world, only the elves had a world tree. The elves did not even have that many of those fruits, so how did the humans get their hands on so many? He did not understand it. Please allow me to explain that later. Your Majesty, please come with me to visit the Dragon Palace network first. Then, I will bring you to a place. Once there, you will understand everything. An unfathomable smile appeared on Watson's face as he led the Elven King to the Golden River. Even though he said he was not worried about his comfort, the Elven King still called for 100 platinum-tier soldiers. Delta, Claudia, and Nia were also there, following Watson. Is everyone ready? If you are, I will activate the Dragon Palace's defenses and let everyone enter. Watson looked around, and the Elven soldiers responded weakly. They were drinking and eating when the Elven King called them to accompany him on his tour of the Dragon Palace. They had wanted to continue tasting the gold-tier magical beast meat and sun fruit wine. Unfortunately, that was an order from the Elven King, and they did not dare resist. Seeing that everyone was ready, Watson did not hesitate. He chanted an incantation at the Golden River in front of him. The mirror-like surface immediately cracked open and turned into a vortex that swirled downward. A powerful force came forth, and with an irresistible momentum, sucked Watson, the Elven King, and the others into it. Protect His Majesty. The group of Elven soldiers became nervous because of the sudden force. They thought there would be some danger underwater, so they approached the Elven King nervously and drew their longbows. However, they stopped halfway. After they entered the water, an enormous palace appeared in front of them. Transparent passages extended from all directions of the palace, connecting to an unknown direction. On the ground, rivers crisscrossed, they kept running. Where is that? Aren't we entering the river? Why are we here? The elves looked around in surprise. Bubbles were rising in the air. Other than those beautiful, colorful bubbles, that place was no different from the land. There was no river water as they had expected. Welcome to the world reflected in the water. That is the Dragon Palace. Watson opened his arms, bowed slightly, and introduced the Dragon Palace to the elves. The Dragon Palace exists in the reflection of the water. It is an illusory world, independent of reality. Because it is independent of reality, it can instantly reach any place in reality. The transparent channels in the sky are the paths of the Dragon Palace, which can transport people or goods. The water below the Dragon Palace is the sum of all the waterways of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, which is equivalent to coordinates. We just came from that waterway. Watson pointed to a waterway, and the elves looked at it. The water was clear, and they could see the elves eating and drinking on the other side of the river. They could not help but click their tongues in wonder. We can actually see the outside world from here. It looks like the water is like a mirror. Are we in the mirroring world now? You can think of it that way. Does it cover the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom? Yes. It's really amazing. The elves, who had been depressed because the Elven King had disturbed them while they were eating and drinking, were filled with excitement after seeing the magnificence and magic of the Dragon Palace. Very good, the Elven King said in an excited voice. He had an unexpected feeling after seeing the Dragon Palace. The Dragon Palace would be his as long as he conquered the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Chapter 588, The Speechless Delta. Those passages are fascinating. We can go to different areas of the Holy Dragon Kingdom through those passages. That is much better than any teleportation magic. The elves were initially worried that Watson had bad intentions to bring them to that unfamiliar area, but after a few minutes of visiting, they lowered their guard. Some of the elves even began to swim on the water surface. The water in the passage wrapped their bodies as they entered the water below, splashing a few drops of water. Their bodies immediately disappeared and appeared in the reflection of the water surface. After a while, their bodies appeared again. In just a few minutes, those elves had already appeared on more than 10 different water surfaces, saying, "I went out, and I came back." They were having a lot of fun. "Your Majesty, did not you just ask me why humans can obtain large amounts of sun fruits to make sun fruit wine? I'll take you to see it now." Seeing that the elves were interested in the Dragon Palace, Watson threw them another bombshell. He spread his combat aura wings on his back and led the elves to a transparent passage. After entering the passage, they were soaked in the water in the passage. They were comfortable, but their clothes were not wet. Not long after entering the passage, the water surged and turned into an invisible hand that pushed them down the path and into one of the horizontal waterways on the ground. Splash! The scenery changed again. They had already left the Dragon Palace. In front of them was a towering mountain peak that reached the clouds. A calm sea lay beneath their feet, but black fog floated on the surface. A large ship that was also pitch black and emitting an ominous aura could be vaguely seen flashing across the surface of the sea. Further away was a plain that was covered in white snow. The cold wind blew from the direction of the plain, blowing the elves' hair. "Where is this place?" "This is the border. The closest kingdom is the Winter Nation in the north, and it is also my hometown." "The thing you want is here," Watson replied calmly. The elves turned their heads and looked around. Soon, their eyes were attracted to the same thing. That thing was neither the majestic sacred mountain that covered the entire border nor the Sea of Death that covered the same area. Instead, it was a divine tree that stood on Mount Creation. The tree was surrounded by spiral stairs. It was unknown how high the stairs were, but the umbrella that opened covered the entire sky. It even blocked the sunlight. The massive umbrella of the tree swayed with the wind, and the leaves rustled. The umbrella shone like diamonds. "Look! Is that a world tree?" An elf's voice trembled. The other elves and the Elven King widened their eyes. They could not speak for a long time. The Elven King did not understand how Watson brewed the sun fruit wine, and then he realized that there was a world tree in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. It seemed even more vibrant than the one in the Elven Kingdom. The world tree was filled with all kinds of sun and moon fruits. They also saw many ordinary fruit trees on Mount Creation, which also had sun and moon fruits. "There's a world tree in the human kingdom? Am I dreaming?" The Elven King muttered to himself first, then his expression became excited. After seeing that shocking scene, he did not feel confused but became excited. He felt like he had made an enormous profit. Even if he could not obtain anything from the attack on the Holy Dragon Kingdom, as long as he could get those two things, the Elven Kingdom would profit greatly. "It's all thanks to Watson. Otherwise, I would not have known that the human kingdom had the world tree." Taking a deep breath, the Elven King looked at Watson with eyes full of praise. He thought that he had made the right decision to pull Watson into their group on the way. "I wonder how you feel after seeing that, Your Majesty?" Watson asked meaningfully. He was a kind young man. He had shown the elves the benefits of the Golden River. He had also brought the Elven King to visit the Dragon Palace and Mount Creation to let him understand the power of the Holy Dragon Kingdom so that he would not attack them. If the Elven King was afraid of what was happening before him and stopped the attack in time, he could still let the Elven King bring those troops back and would not do anything to destroy them. However, to Watson's surprise, the Elven King patted him on the shoulder and gave him a thumbs up. "Watson, you did well this time. Initially, I wanted to occupy the royal city first, but now I've changed my mind. It's better to occupy this place first. After this place becomes mine, the Elven Kingdom will have 2 world trees. I've used up all the water from the Spring of Life during this expedition. I was worried about what I would do if the spring of life ran out of water in the future, but now it's all better. No way. Watson was speechless. He did not expect the Elven King to be even more excited when he saw those things. Was he not afraid that the Holy Dragon Kingdom would not be easy to defeat? Delta was also speechless. She had felt fear when she saw the Dragon Palace and the World Tree. The Dragon Palace network proved that the Holy Dragon Kingdom's army could appear wherever there was a waterway. The World Tree verified that the Holy Dragon Kingdom's soldiers would never die, just like the elves. The only advantage the Elven army had over the Holy Dragon Kingdom soldiers was the power of supernatural evolution, which made the elves more powerful than ordinary humans. While Delta was thinking about that, a few winged figures suddenly floated from Mount Creation not far away. Their surprised voices were like muffled thunder rolling in the sky. "Young Master Watson, you're back. Everyone, young Master Watson is back." Boom! At least 1,000,000 people rose into the sky simultaneously, following the voices of the few figures in the sky. Some of them were servants. Some of them were carrying hoes. Obviously, they were farmers. The weakest among them was a platinum tier elite, not to mention the armored knights at the forefront. The weakest among them must have been at least a diamond tier elite. Delta, who had thought that the elves were stronger than humans, had given up on that idea. Even without Watson, the humans in front of her were not weaker or stronger than the elves, and their numbers were comparable to the elves. Those people could defeat the Elven army by themselves. That is only the force at the border force. If the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom's army was mobilized. Delta muttered to herself with difficulty. She could not imagine such a scene. The Elven Kingdom would probably be destroyed. If she had known that the Holy Dragon Kingdom possessed such powerful strength, she would never have agreed to the Elven King's plan of attack. She believed that the Elven King would wake up after seeing all that as well. Delta wanted to see the Elven King's surprised expression. However, the Elven King did not seem angry. Instead, he looked excited. "Those people are very imposing. They appear to be at least platinum tier. Watson, they call you young master. Don't tell me they're all your subordinates? That's great. With these people joining us, it'll be even easier to conquer the Holy Dragon Kingdom." Delta was speechless. Chapter 589, on different channels. Seeing the Elven King in that state, Delta was speechless. She could not understand why the Elven King could still smile after seeing how powerful the border was. She could not even smile. The border army alone could wipe out the Elven army. Watson did not need to join the Elven Kingdom at all. The Elven King should understand that Watson had said he wanted to join the Elven Kingdom as a joke. It must have been a lie. Delta really did not want to expose that matter when she saw the smile on the Elven King's face. However, she understood that it would be too late if she did not disclose it. As she was about to say something, the Elven King suddenly clapped his hands. "Watson, it seems like that the border is even more gorgeous than the Dragon Palace. I have just visited the Dragon Palace. Next, you can show me around here. Coincidentally, I want to go to the mountain to see how that world tree compares to the one in the Elven Kingdom." "Of course, Your Majesty. That's exactly what I'm thinking." Watson was all smiles as he led the Elven King and the others toward the direction of Mount Creation. Among the elves, only Delta looked worried and unhappy. Soon, everyone arrived above Mount Creation. Among the millions of people hovering on the mountain, a few of them came to Watson and knelt respectfully on one knee. The first commander of the Black Moon Knights, Alan, greets young Master Watson. The second commander, List, greets young Master Watson. Alan and List wore black armor and looked curiously at the elves around Watson. They knew about the war between the Elven Kingdom and the Holy Dragon Kingdom, but they did not care about it. No matter how hard the Elven army attacked, they would not reach the border. Even if the Elven army could get to the border successfully, they would use their powerful strength to fight them back. With the energy contained in Mount Creation, dealing with the small elven army was nothing. When they saw more than 100 elves following Watson, they did not think that the elves had captured Watson. Instead, they felt like Watson had subdued the elves. Previously, Watson had subdued the sea folks and the dragon race. The elves were not as good as the other two races, so Watson must have subdued them as well. With such thoughts in mind, Alan and List did not treat the elves in front of them as enemies. Instead, they treated them as guests and future companions who had come from afar. They wore cordial smiles on their faces. While the two of them were sizing up the elves were also sizing up List and Alan. Due to their supernatural powers, they had evolved from silver or gold tier to platinum tier mythical creatures. However, the two people standing in front of them were humans, but the aura emanating from their bodies was stronger than a diamond tier elite. It made them feel suffocated. It was hard to imagine how humans, who were weaker than the elves, could train to reach that tier. Let me introduce everyone. These are the two commanders of Mount Creation. Behind them are the other Black Moon Knights Legion commanders and deputy commanders. After introducing the elves, Watson turned around and introduced Alan and the others. List, Alan, this is the Elven King and his subordinates. Later, I'll have to trouble you to bring them to Mount Creation for a tour. I haven't been back for a long time, so I'll go and visit my parents first. The flow of time on Mount Creation was 10 times faster than the outside world. He had not returned for a few months, so several years had already passed there. As he spoke, Watson turned around and flew toward the summit of Mount Creation, while List and Alan respectfully agreed. They stood up and gestured for the Elven King to follow them. Your Majesty, please come with us. Please make yourself at home. From now on, Mount Creation is your home. In the spirit of being Watson's subordinates and being friendly to the elves so that they could work together in the future, the two of them said those words, but in the Elven King's ears, those words had a different meaning. It's my first time coming here, and they want me to treat this place like my own home. What do they mean? As expected, Watson means to offer this place to me. A smug smile appeared on the Elven King's face, and he waved his hand. Of course, we will do that. If Watson wanted to offer that place to him, then it was his territory. Should he be courteous in his own territory? For some reason, the two parties had completely different thoughts in their minds, but they were on the same channel. I wonder what the Elven King would like to see first. Mount Creation covers a vast area and is rich in resources, List said politely. The Elven King paused for a moment before saying, It's fine. I'm not in a hurry. I want to see the World Tree. Let's start with that. Very well, Your Majesty. With the Elven King in tow, List and Alan flew toward the direction of the World Tree. Alan told the other commanders and deputy commanders of the Black Moon Knights who were still floating in the sky. Leave the rest of the tour to List and me. If everyone continues to stay, it will be very chaotic. Everyone should go back and do what they need to do. The group of people then left the sky reluctantly. It seemed like those elves were a race that Watson had just subdued. It would be beneficial to have a good relationship with those elves. Unfortunately, Alan, as the First Legion's commander, had already spoken, so the others could not stay any longer. It seems like the two of you have a very high status on this mountain. In the face of Alan, who had dismissed over 1 million people with a single sentence, the Elven King's eyes could not help but light up. Even though Watson had just introduced List and Alan as the commanders of the Black Moon Knights on Mount Creation, he had no idea what that meant. In his opinion, the commanders of the human armies should be like the Elven generals. They had the right to lead troops into battle. It would not be easy for them to give orders to the civilians and ask them to obey. On the contrary, the noblemen who did not have the right to lead troops had greater authority in that area. Only a great lord could command 1 million people with just a word. It seemed like the two generals in front of him were not only higher UPS, but they must also have great noble identities. What did Watson mean by having such precious identities by his side? It meant that Watson valued him. The Elven King was excited. He was even more confident that Watson wanted to offer him Mount Creation. Your Majesty, you must be joking. Our identities on this mountain are only equivalent to those of a guard captain, Alan replied modestly, cursing the Elven King in his heart. He was not lying. If Mount Creation were compared to a slightly larger manor, he would be equivalent to a guard captain of a patrolling team, and he was not even the only captain. In Watson's setting, Black Moon Knight's 10 legions were equal in rank. There was no concept of nobility on Mount Creation. Everyone was equal. He could command millions of people because Watson was the only master there, and since he was the captain of Watson's guards, he had the authority to do that. In the past, the races that Watson had subdued, be it the sea folks or the dragon race, were surprised when they saw Mount Creation for the first time. However, they were not as exaggerated as the Elven King, who thought he and List were big shots. That showed that the Elven King was very ignorant. The two of you are too modest. If you were in the Elven army, someone as capable as the two of you would be more than enough to be an elder in power. The Elven King believed that Alan and List were being modest. Alan and List were even more certain that the Elven King had insufficient knowledge. The Elven elders were the elves' top management. They were so powerful that they could even dismiss some of the Elven King's decisions. However, Alan and List were only guards on Mount Creation, but the Elven King thought they were the same as the elves' elders. Both sides had their own thoughts. After a few minutes, they arrived at the World Tree. Chapter 590, The Stubborn Elven King. Your Majesty, we have arrived. This is the World Tree on Mount Creation. That is the second World Tree in the world that young Master Watson had cultivated. Alan's words were filled with admiration for Watson. I can't believe that Watson can create a deep-sea submarine and also grow a world tree. The Elven King clicked his tongue. He had never heard that a world tree could be obtained through cultivation. Otherwise, the elves would not be the only ones in the world to have a world tree. In ancient times, some gods cultivated the world tree. Perhaps Watson's cultivation method had been passed down from ancient times. When he had time, he would ask Watson for the formula so that the method would not spread and affect the elves. As he pondered, the Elven King heard Alan continue to say, Your Majesty, which world tree is better, this one or the one in the Elven Kingdom? Of course, our world tree is more powerful. After all, it has been passed down from ancient times. It is not something this world tree can compare to. The Elven King refuted calmly, but he thought differently. The world tree in front of him was full of vitality. It was completely different from the one in the Elven Kingdom. Countless types of sun and moon fruits were hanging on the tree's thick branches. There were roughly hundreds of thousands of them. In comparison, the number of sun and moon fruits on the world tree in the Elven Kingdom was only a few hundred. Those fruits would only ripen after being watered by the spring of life for nearly 1,000 years. They were essential items to test the quantity and quality of the spring of life's water. The world tree in front of them could nourish so many sun and moon fruits. That proved that it was not the same as the Elven Kingdom's world tree. I have to be calm. I can't appear too surprised. He could not show his thoughts on the surface. After all, the Elven King was the leader of the Elven race and the elf who would inherit that mountain in the future. If he showed his shock in front of those humans, it would be too demeaning. Your Majesty, this world tree is obviously much better than ours. Our tree cannot bear so many sun and moon fruits. An honest elf exclaimed as he pointed at the world tree in front of him while he was thinking. As he spoke, he swallowed his saliva. I have never tasted the sun and moon gems from our tree. This world tree bears so many fruits. It should be fine for me to taste one. What nonsense are you spouting? Do you mean ours don't have the same fruits? It does have the sun fruit and the moon fruit. Aren't they common fruits in our kingdom? Don't act so ignorant. The Elven King turned around and slapped the drooling elf. He pretended to be serious. Holding his red and swollen cheek, the elf looked aggrieved. He knew that the Elven King was spouting nonsense to protect his dignity. He was unhappy, but he did not dare to show it. Please don't be so angry, Your Highness. The world tree of Mount Creation may not be as good as the elves. It just so happens that the sun and moon fruits on our tree have matured. Everyone, why don't you have a taste? Perhaps they have a different taste than the two fruits in your kingdom. Alan saw through the Elven King's pretentious mentality and deliberately did not expose him. He smiled and reached out his hand. A strong wave of combat aura spread out from his hand and turned into a hurricane that swept some sun and moon fruits down. He distributed them to every elf. Looking at the fruits in their hands and smelling the fruit's fragrance, the elves swallowed their saliva and stared at them. One of the elves could not resist the desire in his heart and took a bite of the fruit. He ate the sun fruit, and the unique fragrance of the fruit entered his stomach, causing all the hair on his body to stand while his limbs and bones became relaxed. The overly delicious flavor ignited his taste buds and made him close his eyes comfortably. That is the sun fruit. It blooms in 1,000 years, bears fruit in 1,000 years, and ripens in 1,000 years. It tastes like the sun. This is the first time in my life that I have eaten such delicious fruit. After they arrived at the Holy Dragon Kingdom, they tasted the sun fruit wine that Watson had brought from the capital. The wine was very delicious, but it was different from tasting the actual fruit. Since the sun fruit wine was the product of a sun fruit diluted many times, it did not move them as much. The Elven King had brought them to the Dragon Palace from the fortress city. Initially, they were troubled by the fact that they could not eat the magical beast's meat and drink the sun fruit wine. However, their concerns had been put to the back of their minds, and they began to thank the Elven King instead. If the Elven King had not brought them to the border, they would not have been able to taste such delicious food. Some elves grabbed the sun fruit and stuffed it into their mouths. They did not even dare to waste any juice in the fruit. They stuck out their tongues and licked the juice that flowed out of their lips before they dared to speak. This is the taste of the sun fruit? I think I will never forget this taste in my life. Some of the elves were even more exaggerated, they had shed tears. Even the Elven King fell silent after eating the sun fruit. As the king of the elves, he had eaten the fruit before. However, the sun fruit he tasted was on a completely different level from the one he had just eaten. The sun fruit he had eaten was at least 10 times more delicious than the one he had eaten before that. Everyone, eat slowly. We have many more. Alan's words interrupted the elves who were enjoying themselves. The Elven King snapped back to his senses and quickly stuffed the 2 fruits in his hands into his mouth. Well, even though the world tree that you have grown does not look as good as ours, the sun fruit and moon fruit still taste pretty good. It's too delicious. The honest elf, who had just been beaten up, spoke honestly again. Just as the elves praised the sun and moon fruits, a few residents with baskets suddenly flew from the sky and arrived behind the world tree. One of the residents reached out and picked a sun fruit and put it into his mouth. This sun fruit is not ripe yet. It's sour and astringent. It seems like this batch of fruits is not ready yet. We can't use the wish for the world ring to duplicate it and store it in the spiral staircase in the sky. Let's wait for a while before coming back. Spitting out the sun fruit, the residents flew away at an even faster speed. The elves enjoying the sun fruit and the moon fruit were all stunned. These fruits are not ripe? Is it true? The Elven King muttered in a voice that only he could hear. He felt like those fruits were tastier than the ones in his kingdom. If those were unripe, it was hard to imagine how good they would be when they ripened. The Elven King's heart was filled with disbelief. He gritted his teeth, turned around, and walked in front of the elven soldiers, knocking over the sun and moon fruits in their hands. Stop eating! I thought those fruits were not bad when I took the first bite, but now I feel like those fruits were not ripe when I took the second bite. The taste is far from what our fruits taste like.